Good morning and warmly welcome to Alfa Laval Marine Innovation Summit 2022. Now we're broadcasting live from a studio in Lund, southern Sweden, where it is good morning, but I know we have a lot of Asian viewers as well, and for you it's probably more like good evening. Anyway, welcome to all of our viewers here today. My name is Mia Odabas. I have a business degree from Stockholm School of Economics. I've been working as a business journalist both in print, television and radio, and today I will be your guide, your moderator through this very intense and interesting 2 hours that we have in front of us. 2 hours where we will dive into the future of the shipping industry. Now, lots of work concerning decarbonization is going on in the sector. New types of fuels, new regulations, of course, and new ways of working. So we ask ourselves, what's the best way to design a vessel for 2030? We will also look into how the shipping industry will and can invest in human sustainability. We will talk about leadership in the maritime industry, and you'll also get inspiration from another sector that is decarbonizing in a quite fast pace, namely land-based transportation. Now, let me introduce the editorial team that are with us here today. Mr. Magnus Nordin and Mr. Ulrik Frenander from Alfa Laval. Good morning to you, Magnus and Ulrik, and welcome.
Thank you, Mia.
How are you doing this morning?
We are fine, and we are sitting here in a room beside the studio, and we are trying to then follow all the things that are going on in the chat, so all the questions that you participants will have.
So you'll take care of the questions, and let me tell you for the viewers how you pose your questions. In the upper right corner, you will have a question box. It's very easy. You type a question in the question box, and it will appear when it's possible to ask questions. And all the questions end up with you, Magnus and Ulrik, and you send them to us here. You will come back later on in this event. So looking forward to meeting you again, Magnus and Ulrik.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, it's time to open this event. And for the opening, let me introduce the President and CEO of Alfa Laval, Mr. Tom Eriksson. Good morning, Tom, and welcome.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you, so far.
So far, so
Yes.
good. That's very good. So this is a brand new studio. This is the first broadcasting in the new studio. What do you say?
Well, so far it works, right? There's a lot of electronics behind the scene and a lot of people working with it. So it's an exciting day for us. And I think it's a reflection of, we started this when COVID came. And we're obviously not meeting all of our viewers today physically, as we don't do it as much anymore. And so it's a good timing for this. We are
So
very
new
pleased.
ways of working, we'll be talking about that later on.
Indeed.
The stage is yours, Tom.
Thank you. So on behalf of myself as well, welcome to everybody. We're looking forward to this day. Let me start, and we're going to be into lots of details later on during the day, but let me just put the summit in a bit of a context. As you well know, this started on the back of the climate change and the regulations and what we needed to do in decarbonization. And as you well know, we are working with a lot of aspects of that in the marine industry and also in the energy industry at large. And that was sort of kicking off the whole idea of the summit. On top of that, over the last couple of years, we've been, from a business point of view, been thrown a couple of other challenges as well. COVID being one that challenged us from how we work with customers, but also how we work internally. We also had a fair amount of disruptions in supply chains that created its own challenges in the industrial system. Now, on top of that, geopolitics have become more complex over the last year, continuously, I would say. Part of that conflict resides in the strategic clash between China and the US, where there are some concerns about how global business will be in the future and whether we will adjust to a more regional business model over time. With the invasion of Russia in Ukraine, we have another conflict on the doorstep of Europe, complicating matters. Again, when it comes to free trade and the flow of goods, leaving aside the whole humanitarian crisis that we have related to that issue. So it is a complex world, and it's changing us and challenging us in the way we work, how we think about business, how we organize supply chains, and how we deal with the uncertainties of the future. There's been some speculation of whether geopolitics and inflation and the crisis in Ukraine, whether it will derail the climate agenda or whether the political systems as well as citizens in the world will stand by the ambitions of the climate agenda. And I think our conclusion so far is that that agenda remains as firm as it ever has been. So the long-term direction in terms of where we are going in decarbonization, I think is founded well within the consciousness and the programs in business, but also in the political sphere. That doesn't mean that there are no short-term implications of what's happening right now. And I think the biggest change you will see in the global energy system. The understanding that we need a robust energy system that handles a transition from the old fossil-based to the new fossil-free is a big undertaking. And we see when we have disruptions like the situation in Ukraine, how extremely volatile the energy system we normally take for granted becomes. And consequently, I think there will be some implications also for the marine industry in the turmoil that we are seeing. One of them, and I think the clearest one, is in LNG. The European dependence on LNG will escalate dramatically. We will see terminal build-up in Europe in a pace we've never seen before. And of course, we will see the transportation needs from LNG, both from the North American side and from Middle East, increase dramatically over the coming years. So there will be, let's say, from the marine industry's perspective, some positive effects on this. There may be some negative effects as well. The question of whether we reached the peak of the globalization and whether we will see some reduction of global trade based on more regional supply chains is an obvious consideration. We have not seen that yet. I don't expect it to be alarmingly quick, but I think we may see some dampening of at least the historic growth numbers that we see in global trade going forward. There you have maybe some of the short, medium-term implications for the marine industry. At the end of the day, it doesn't change the underlying agenda for today's meeting. Our experience in Alfa Laval so far when it comes to decarbonization, and we work with it broadly in other industries outside of the marine industry as well, is that there's no holy grail to these solutions. And that's why we felt for a long time that ship owners, industrial owners need a toolbox. We need many tools to address the problem, and we need a lot of innovation in order to accelerate that program. That's where we are as a company, and we know many of you are in the same situation. I think we have crises on our hand, and crises, as tough as they are sometimes doing a lot of good in terms of spurring and driving innovation and pace and speed. And that's where I think we are today, and that's the background for our meeting, and I hope you're going to have a really exciting day, accelerating also your change in how you do your business going forward. So with that...
Thank you very much, Tom, for this presentation. Now, you talked about crisis. Never waste a good crisis, basically.
Yes, indeed. It is, well, part of the crisis obviously is somewhat bad at the moment, but it does force us. I think the big change we see is the pace of decision making. And that is a positive aspect in a way, but I think we also have to be clear that for many of us and for many of our customers, we're increasing, let's say, the technical risks in solutions that are so rapidly developed that normally we give it 5 years and tests and pilots and all of that. We don't quite have that time at this moment. So the compression of time is driving pace, and it's somewhat increasing the technical risks in what we're doing at the moment.
So you need to speed up here. Now, you gave good background on why you need innovation, basically. So that's why you do this innovation summit, to come out with...
I think what we've learned in the acceleration is that we need to work much closer together in the supply chain. Before, maybe we used to have a good idea and we go to the lab and we invent something, and 5 years later something pops up and we test it, and 10 years later we have a product. And that's not the time horizon we have. So we are much more in partnerships with other suppliers and technology companies, with customers and others. So I think the whole innovation space creates this need to getting together. And I think this is maybe a small step. If it can help a little bit in this process for everybody to be gathered around the table, I think it's a very good thing.
It is a changing environment. So what do you expect from this summit?
Well, my hope is that everybody walks away with a little bit of learning. You know, and if I think we are somewhere 700-800 people around the world watching this, and hopefully a few more afterwards in a recorded version. I think if we all, as 1,000 people in the industry, can get together, learn a little bit, and understand where things are going and exchange experiences, I think then we've done a small contribution for a very big project, which is decarbonizing the marine industry in the next 30-40 years. So
a bit of learning and exchanging experience, I think we can promise that.
And a bit of purpose.
And a bit of purpose as well.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Tom Eriksson.
Thank you.
So now it's time for our first keynote speaker of this morning session. This woman is the first woman president of the World Maritime University, WMU, which is based in Malmö, close to Lund. She is seen as one of the top 100 most influential in the shipping industry. She's a distinguished lawyer referred to as the mother of MLC. That's the Maritime Labour Convention, which is kind of the seafarers' bills of rights. She's credited with creating a level playing field for ship owners. And WMU is the world's most prestigious maritime university, founded by the IMO, and to grant postgraduate degrees in this sector. So let's welcome Dr. Cleopatra Doumbia-Henry. Good morning, Cleo.
Good morning.
Welcome to the conference.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I look forward to an engaging
We look forward to listening to you.
today.
It's going to be about inspiring leadership for sustainable maritime and ocean future.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Eriksson, Tom, as everybody calls him, the CEO of Alfa Laval, Ms. Samir Kralla, President of the Marine Division, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me enormous pleasure to join you here today at the 2022 Alfa Laval Innovation Summit under the theme, Together for Sustainable Shipping. Incredible topic. This topic goes to the very core of the vision of the World Maritime University to inspire leadership and innovation for sustainable maritime and oceans future. We are today living in challenging times. Climate change, human rights, security crises, global pandemic, biodiversity loss, just to name a few. We all know that shipping is the backbone of international trade. We saw how important it is during this pandemic. With a contribution of more than 80% of cargo by volume and 70% by value, shipping is the most energy-efficient mode of transportation. The maritime industry is standing at the start of one of the greatest technological challenges of our times, as it appears to transition to zero and low carbon emissions, enabling the industry to adapt through the adoption of technological innovations. The IMO, the International Maritime Organization, to which I belong as the president of the World Maritime University, this important institution, the IMO, has already committed the international maritime community to reduce the total annual GHG emissions from international shipping by at least 50% by 2050, compared to the 2008 targets, while pursuing efforts towards phasing them out by the end of this century. We do hope that the world achieves this important target. Following COP26, as the world is trying to emerge from the pandemic, we are continuing to intensify all our efforts towards global decarbonization, and that has to happen both from ships and in ports. Another key challenge relates to the fair treatment of seafarers. A career at sea today provides many benefits. However, it largely goes unrecognized that the women and the men who work on ships spend very long periods of time at sea, away from their families, working in very demanding and isolated and often dangerous conditions. In addition, the COVID-19 pandemic unprecedentedly magnified these conditions and has shown a light on the issues regarding working conditions and the fair treatment of seafarers. With respect to environmental sustainability, it is very clear that we cannot continue to treat the oceans and nature as a whole as a pristine and inexhaustible supply of natural resources that can absorb the negative aspects of every operational activity undertaken in it, and without the thought of its state and its sustainability. The ocean remains the basis of all life and is global as well as national systems of governance, as well as education, have to shift from a paradigm which is exclusively seeking the exploitation of the ocean to one that is sustainable and seeks sustainable stewardship and the use of our ocean. Yet, we must not be daunted by the scale of these challenges that we must face squarely. Global challenges require global solutions, and the plethora of opportunities are emerging. In a sphere of human endeavor, new technologies are making a big impact, and in some contexts, significantly widening the societal gaps. The inevitable technological innovation and automation in the shipping sector, such as artificial intelligence, robotics, digitalization, along with the changes in socio-political patterns, are shifting the nature of work, generating new demands from the companies, from regulators, from customers, and certainly from investors, and not forgetting non-governmental organizations. These new demands are in turn transforming market conditions by creating new challenges for shipping companies. The future of work needs to ensure that the maritime professionals are today suitably qualified to effectively master new technologies and higher levels of automation. Countries with the most adaptive skills will reap the most benefits from increased automation. Special attention will therefore need to be paid to the digital skills that we all need for the future, their combination with maritime skills and an understanding of port operations. Ships without ports are not possible. The tasks of maritime professionals are anticipated to increasingly transform into digital ones, especially in operation monitoring and system management that will most likely reduce operational work. Solutions, in our view, lies in education and in building capacity globally. Globally, I say, across the world, coupled with collaborative action to ensure strong leadership and commitment. And that's where education comes in. Education for the future should definitely cover the technical competencies that are required in the multiple professional areas of the maritime sector, whether with respect to ship operation, therefore seafarers on board ships, not just on land, even if we think we would like to see that happen, or in areas such as maritime finance, shipbuilding, and the maritime and ocean governance are among the many issues that we must now still face. Since technological competencies and technical ones based on well-grounded knowledge and skills are of course among the most important and critical to the survival of the maritime industry. In addition, education for the maritime sector should endeavor to impart knowledge and the right attitudes to develop global maritime citizens who embrace innovation in keeping with fundamental human values and who ethically use technology to advance global goals. The kind of development should not only focus on just educating tomorrow's industry actors and maritime leaders based solely on the past and present labor markets, but it must dynamically interrogate future possibilities to create opportunities for the beneficial use of technology and to find innovative solutions for the pressing needs of today and those anticipated for the future. The World Maritime University is an apex institution for postgraduate studies and research of the International Maritime Organization, founded in 1983 by the IMO to serve the development of important and senior level persons in order to ensure that all countries had the relevant capacities to engage in maritime affairs. WMU has grown as a center of excellence in maritime education, training, research, and capacity building. And in accordance with the United Nations General Assembly, it has been recognized as an important institution. WMU has a remarkable presence and a reliable network of maritime and ocean leaders. To date, 5,634 professionals from 171 countries and territories have graduated from WMU. Our alumni hold positions of prominence around the world. They serve as senior maritime officials in ministries, as ministers of government, as directors of shipping companies and ports, and heads of maritime academies and naval institutions. And many represent their home countries at the IMO and in other international fora and organizations. WMU is a melting pot of innovative ideas where countries can send their future leaders to enhance the global discourse and inform meaningful dialogue relating to maritime and ocean issues, and to advance the optimum on-the-job performance in various fields that we address. However, we cannot just focus on educating future maritime and ocean leaders from governments. We also need to empower the future leaders from the maritime industry. I am delighted to see that Alfa Laval, your Innovation Summit, is timely. It is important and it is fit for purpose. Cooperation stands at the beginning of the success and the resilience of the global maritime transport and logistics community towards sustainable shipping and the cooperation which remains necessary as we tackle the worldwide challenges we are facing today. We should all agree that we can achieve a lot, but we can only do so if we work together. I wish to thank you and wish you the best for the success of this summit.
Thank you very much, Cleo, for this presentation. Now, you outline here lots of challenges for the industry, of course. How would you say that the WMU has or will adapt your education to face these challenges?
Well, I would say that we have to adapt at all times. And as an educational institution, you have to be on the ball, and we have to be actually ensuring that we provide the first-class education required. And it's therefore it's our mandate to ensure that we actually not build the right levels of capacity. We provide the knowledge and expertise that is required as we take the world forward. As you see, development and technology is going faster at the speed of light than we can run after it. And so I think that, you know, the opportunity that we have for an institution of the IMO, International Maritime Organization, like WMU, with all of the sort of opportunities that it offers us without restrictions, and that's the wonderful thing. I don't have to fall and follow the line of the IMO perfectly, in the sense that if we see things happening, we should also call it out and encourage member states that actually are part of the international organizations that set the rules and regulations, that they could go a little bit faster in dealing with the issues of today, which particularly relates to the impact of climate change and the future of, in fact, not just us today, but the future of the ones that come tomorrow, our children and our children's children.
So you could actually push them when it's needed.
Yes, and that is what an academic institution ought to be doing. While we are a part of IMO, we also have that independence as an academic institution to actually identify the issues and to say, look, we've got to fix it, or we've got to move forward as we want to catch up with that fast-paced changes that the world is experiencing today. Technology is, and that is, this just being here today and seeing how this event is being transmitted, technology is enabling us to do things we would have never managed to do before. And therefore, the opportunity is now, the young people who are able to enable us to do these things today is an opportunity we cannot miss. And therefore, the world will not stop. And the institutions, they'd have to do the right thing and create the new instruments, because the instruments have to come up and adapt to the times. My concern is how slow that kind of sort of regeneration and review of instruments, that takes, in my view, too long to happen.
It's too slow? Do you think it's a too slow process?
I think it's too slow process. It takes too much time for member states to ratify the instruments and to implement them, because one thing you can have, in the first place, you can have these instruments, but if they are not ratified, if they are not effectively implemented, then there is a lot of loss, which is unfortunate. And there are, you know, the world is changing rapidly. There are so many big new issues that are coming along stream with technology, the technological developments. We see it here today, and my presence today shows the, you know, the way in which technology now is moving and enabling us to reach the whole world.
So lots of room for improvement concerning the pace.
Yes.
We might come back to that, because you will also be our guest on the second panel. Thank you very much, Dr. Cleopatra Doumbia-Henry, for the presentation. And we'll see you a little bit later on in the event.
And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Now it's time for our first panel. Now, the maritime industry's approach to fighting climate change has changed dramatically during the last couple of years. Ship owners have set decarbonization targets, and vessels with alternative propulsions are being ordered. And the discussions on a carbon levy is on top of the agenda pretty much everywhere. But the greenhouse gas emissions from the industry is enormous. Shipping's share of global emissions is about 2 to 3%, and the time is scarce. Now, International Maritime Organization, IMO, as Dr. Doumbia-Henry told us, has set a target for decarbonization. It's cutting vessel-related greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2050. And this, of course, demands many new fuels. We're talking about ammonia, methanol, hydrogen, also batteries, actually, for short-run voyages, and even sails, I've heard, are making a comeback. IMO will come out with a new greenhouse gas strategy in 2023. That's already next year, explaining the standard set going for 2050. Now, how will these new regulations affect the industry? Which propulsion method will be selected when building vessels after next year? It has to be vessels complying with the zero compliance target, of course. And what information and tools are needed for ship owners to make the right decisions? That's the topic of our first panel here today. And we have 4 distinguished panelists that I will soon present. Just a little bit of a reminder for the viewers first. Do pose your questions, comments and reflections. You do that in the upper right corner of the screen. And I know that Magnus and Ulrik are more than ready to take care of your questions. And we'll hear them a bit later on in the panel. So let me introduce the 4 panelists for this session. Ms. Birgit Liodden, you're CEO and founder of the Ocean Opportunity Lab tool. That's the world's first floating entrepreneur lab. I know on Twitter you call yourself an ocean business activist, and you've also been seen as one of the top 100 global maritime female profiles. Very welcome, Birgit.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here, and I look forward to this discussion.
It's very good to have you here. Also welcome to Mr. Rasmus Bach-Nielsen, who's Global Head of Fuel Decarbonization at Trafigura Group. And your job is to reducing the group's shipping emission footprint, and you have been very active in arguing for a higher pace of decarbonization. We'll come back to this, but first of all, most welcome to you too.
Thank you. Pleasure.
And welcome also to Mr. Li Qin, who is Vice Director Innovation Center at Shanghai Merchant Ship Design and Research Institute. You educate the people to design the future vessels. Welcome.
Thank you, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Very good to have you. And Mr. George Paul Parantzakis, you're the Managing Director of Naftomar Shipping. So from you, we're going to hear the ship owners and the operators' point of view. Most welcome to you too.
Thank you very much for having us here today.
It's great to have all of you with us. So if I start with you, Birgit, you're a front runner. You have your nose in many very exciting projects, shipping projects. You design the vessels of the future. And when we were talking on email, you had a very interesting way of describing the vessel ready for 2030. You said you have to use the Lego mentality. Could you please elaborate a bit on that?
Definitely. I think one of the big challenges that we've seen for quite a while now with IMO regulations is that the regulations are too much directing what the actors is to do, not what they need to achieve. And we all know that in order to reach zero emission, we will need to have ships that will bring on new technology and new zero emission solutions as we go. So that's why I see the new ships coming out in the market as platforms where we need to be able to add, update, and renew various components in a hybrid way in order to gradually transfer to completely zero-emission run vessels. And I think that is a great challenge for the new generation of innovators across tech and sustainability to come together with the established actors.
It's a great challenge, you say. Do you see it happen? Do you see it coming?
We are bringing a couple of zero-emission projects to North Shipping next week. One French Arctic expedition startup and a zero-emission concept for a floating culture stage with the redesign of Ulstein Expo. So let's see. At least that's what we're here for, to really connect those change makers with the established actors so that they can actually get both the muscles, experiences to run faster. And I do think the cargo owners will play an instrumental role in this journey ahead.
We'll come back to this, very interesting things going on there. Now, Rasmus, turning to you. Now, the idea of a carbon levy on shipping to make fuels more competitive, because green fuels are still 2 to 3 times more expensive than other fuels. Trafigura first proposed it in September 2020, and it has made extraordinary progress, actually. From being seen as pretty unrealistic, it's now kind of mainstream, and everybody's talking about it. Even AP Møller-Mærsk is backing it. How close would you say that you are to get this carbon levy and to get it adopted by the IMO that I know that you want?
Okay, it's a very good question. IMO obviously is a very large organization with a lot of different interests. It has come far. A tremendous mindset change has taken place. There's very good news in the sense that a leading IMO nation next week will publicize its own fee-based carbon levy proposal within the IMO, which is to be discussed at the next IMO meeting. So from where we were a bit more than a year and a half ago, it's great progress. The challenge is it has to go even faster. As an industry, and going back to what my function is, it is to decarbonize Trafigura shipping business. 75% of our Scope 3 emissions originates out of shipping. And the challenge for us is if the industry does not decarbonize, then it's very difficult for us to decarbonize. The challenge the industry has is that the green fuels which we are to offtake and which the ship owners are to burn, as you alluded before, is 2 to 3 times more expensive than the current fossil fuels. So the challenge that we have, and it's a chicken and egg situation, is even though the ship owners and operators would like to buy the engines which are available, whether that's the green ammonia engine or the methanol engine, technology is there, but the challenge is the fuels are not there. So we need a market mechanism where actually people can be incentivized to offtake the fuels. I give an example of the challenge, the real challenge, and we are part of a very large green ammonia project in Norway. And in a year and a half, we will have to make a decision whether to invest and produce 210,000 tons of green ammonia together with Renewable Investment Fund, CIP. The challenge that we have is we cannot offtake that fuel today because there is no market. And there is no market because there's no engines, and there's no engines because there's no fuels. So we actually decided to go one level further up, which is the political level, and that is we need regulators to come in with a mechanism so we can actually be encouraged to bring the fuels to the market.
Yes, because you've been arguing, you've consistently argued actually for quite a long time now for regulatory intervention, not least a global price on carbon. I've heard you say that with regulation you have clarity. When do you see this coming, this global price on carbon?
Well, so it's great, and we know the fact because we have been consulted. There is a very big IMO nation next week that is bringing forward a proposal within the IMO, which needs to be discussed at the IMO meeting in June. So it's great progress from where we were, but it's not easy because it is IMO, and IMO is a lot of different interests. But the fact that we have come to a very large nation driving this forward, then there is actually a positive momentum towards the next stage. And then to answer your question, when will this levy be introduced? It's hard to say. In our book, it should be by 2025. Will it be 2026? Potentially, but as an industry, we cannot afford it to be later because it's holding back bringing the fuels, the zero carbon fuels to the market. And in our book, the zero carbon fuels and around the theme here are hydrogen-based. It's either green methanol or green ammonia.
But lots of progress during the last couple of years, and things are really happening, you're describing there. Now, Mr. Lee Chin, you educate people to design the future vessels, and regarding the greenhouse gas emissions, I know that you lack clarity. Rasmus was talking here about regulation drives clarity. What would you say, what consequences is it for the ship designer when you don't have clarity in these issues?
Yeah, so that's a very good question for the ship design. And we all know nowadays we are facing severe situation to control the greenhouse gas, especially for the ship design. We have to consider the carbon emission control. And so far, when we design a vessel, we have 2 principles. The first is the regulations from IMO or the other classification society. And the second is the owner demands, and we have to prepare and make a suitable proposal for owner to balance the CAPEX and OPEX and make the shipping as much as possible, as has the interest as much as possible. So far, nowadays, we have a EEDI for new building vessels and the EXI for existing vessels. So far, we have it. And we all know now IMO may be well prepare a more strict the regulations to the maritime industry. So we are looking forward to it. And I think this is the criteria for the ship design, and I think this is for the first principle. And the second is the maybe Mr. Nielsen talking about the green fuels, alternative fuels, and we all know the technology is there, but we are ship designers, so sometimes we have to find a suitable approach to get that way. So if the owner, in my personal opinion, I think the first priority solution is we have fuels which can meet all the requirements for the maritime industry. So I think this is.
So you're asking for the new fuels, basically. Now, George, as a ship owner and operator, your decisions are mostly shaped by existing technologies and existing fuels, just as Mr. Lee said. So how do you take into account this, that Birgit is talking about technologies around the corners, new fuels, and technologies that have practically not been, it's kind of non-existent or it's non-tested in reality. How do you approach this?
Well, that's what you could call $1 million question. What should you do? So the problem is in multi-level. It's a multi-level problem, actually. First of all, we have to decide what type of ship will be the ship of the future, which is relatively difficult to do right now. We have certain technologies like two-stroke engines that can burn ammonia or methanol, but we are waiting for more developments. And as Bridget said already, indeed, the idea of a modular construction is something that will help you cope with all the challenges of any new, let's say, regulation or new constraints that the vessel may face in her future operation. However, there is another aspect that is not so, let's say, well presented, is that we need to train people to run these ships. And this is something that, we cannot do right now because these ships don't exist. And the technology is not there. We may have, let's say, the engines on a test bed, but we don't have engines running on ammonia in real ships. And even more difficult, we don't have them in training facilities so that people can get trained on how to run these ships safely.
So it's kind of a catch-22 there. How do you deal with this? It's kind of a catch-22 here. How do you deal with this? How do you move forward?
Well, you could say that the best way is baby steps. You go one step at a time. Be always in line with what the regulations are requesting, and doing small change very frequently. So you can have, let's say, a ship that is running on dual fuel, LPG or LNG, and then modify the ship to run on ammonia when the network is ready or the fuel is abundant all over the world. So you will have to adjust constantly. You have to adjust constantly, and people have to be trained on a continuous basis.
So baby steps. Now, I was wondering, Birgit and Rasmus, you were actually pushing for more regulations and for clarity. Birgit, you said that regulators need to focus on the end goal and not dictate the way how to get there. And I know, Rasmus, that you have been saying that the IMO has focused on the technical regulations rather than a carbon levy and a carbon price. Now, when you hear George talking here as a ship owner, it's actually very difficult for him. It's kind of a catch-22 to move forward. What do you think, Birgit? What would help him in this situation?
Well, I I do believe that one of the wisest things today ship owners can do is actually go into alliances with other ship owners and invest in completely new fleets. Because I do think we will see the same as we have seen in the previous shifts, from sail to steam, from steam to today's engines. And we will face a future with a lot of stranded assets, where I do believe that a lot of the ship owners today will probably be replaced by ship owners that come in with kind of clean fleets without big debts on their existing assets. So in a way to kind of combat and get in front of that, I do really believe that today's ship owners need to go in and co-invest in clean fleets moving forward.
So
that's
George,
one part, but,
what do you say about
then,
this? Like co-investing, partnerships, and totally new fleets with new vessels. What do you say, George? Is it an option for you? Yes, George, what do you say?
Yes. Yes, sorry about that. This is something that has to be, thought for. It's a possibility in order to share certain expenses. However, the industry is so big that everybody has to comply at the end. It's not like when you were crossing from the steam to diesel or from sail to steam. Now, there is no way other than this to go forward. So everybody has to comply with this. It's not something that you can escape or you can delay. It's something that you have to do. So yes, definitely we have to investigate all possible solutions, all possible alliances, but it's going to be challenging.
It is challenging and exciting times. Now, Rasmus, you are picking on the regulators to get more clarity and more regulations, but you also have warned that as a ship owner, you can't just simply wait for regulation. You need to be a little bit on your toes. Could you explain how you're thinking?
I'm not sure if we said they need to be on the toes. I totally understand George's challenges, and we see it ourselves with all the ship owners that transport our traded cargoes. It's very difficult to transition significantly without a fuel technology change. So I think for ship owners and operators today, there's optimization of ships, whether that's on newer stocks, slower speeds, etc., which is not happening today, particularly in the container market, because it is as good as it is. In fact, shipping emissions are up in 2022, not down, and they will probably be up again in 2023. And which is just even more flagging the issue that we have as a global industry, and which is why IMO needs to move. Ship owners, what are their sort of opportunities to act? Well, for them to go out and off-take green fuels on a 10-year contract is very, very difficult because the balance sheets are not geared for it. It's not the business that the ship owner is in the business of doing. So I think in terms of off-taking and bringing the fuels to the market, it's difficult. I think you're right, Birgit. Partnerships, get together with owners in terms of, well, can we do some purchasing together in the future? But it's difficult. And we acknowledge it's very, very difficult. And that's why we need the clarity on regulation. It's also difficult for even the largest commodity trading houses and the oil majors. But we have an opportunity because we have more scale. Or I wouldn't call it an opportunity, but we probably have a responsibility. And that's what we're trying to step up on, and we're putting a lot of efforts, as you understand as well, to actually have a framework where conditions are so ship owners can act and have clarity. And also where the shipyards, they can design the right type of ships without having uncertainty. Okay. So there's many challenges at the same time. One more thing back to IMO, and I just jump a little bit on the progress that IMO is making. They're now actually going to having a deeper discussions on full life cycle emissions on fuels. It's a first very big important step because on LNG there's a very large methane is a significant CO2 component, which is not admirable. When IMO they go to full life cycle emissions, it's sort of it makes LNG only 15 to 20% CO2 emission saving. So that's a big step for IMO as well. And then back to sort of just the intro for the before the call here. Well, the IMO targets are in the process being readdressed, and we have 2050 targets. And in our view, and this is coming from society and from all of us in the industry, it needs to be zero emission by 2050, not a 50% reduction.
Okay.
But I'm hopeful that IMO is actually going towards that, and then we get an even clearer road where we need to go together.
So lots of progress and lots of things are happening also in the IMO. Now, Mr. Lee, it's described here as a very challenging and fast-moving environment also for the ship designers of the future. What is the most important thing that you teach your students to kind of go out in this moving target environment?
Yes, so actually I'm not a teacher, and my company is Ship Design Institute, which is a typical type of ship design house. We are focused on ship design, and we made a lot of we provide a lot of design service to the European owners. And regarding your question you raised, and I think this is a systematic issue for maritime industry, and we totally understand what's the owner is thinking now, because we have proceeding many projects at the same time with a different approach to get zero carbon emission. For example, the green fuels, green methanol, green LNG, green ammonia, and this is from fuel aspect. And maybe we will have another after a treatment aspect, like carbon capture system. And of course, we have another a little bit more complex solution, like we will have a methanol on board, and then we can get the hydrogen, and then we will to realize the zero carbon emission. So there is many ways. So now the most important is, so far we don't have a we will discuss or cooperate with the players in the supply chain, from the value chain. For example, we have to stick together with owner, with the main engine manufacturer, and the fuel maker, and the classification society, and then we will have a good solution, good for capex and good for opex, and we will get best balance for the next maybe 20 years navigation for the lifetime of the vessel.
So lots of cooperation there from you as well. It's important moving forward to get things right. Now let's check with the editorial team. Magnus and Ulrik, what are you doing? Do you have any questions for the panelists?
Yes, we have a few questions coming in. Of course, we look forward to seeing more. I have the billion-dollar question here. Which fuel technology do you expect will have the biggest impact in the transition to zero carbon vessels?
Yeah, that's a $10 million question. Who would like to pick on that? Yes, Rasmus. I think you have muted your sound there, so we couldn't hear you.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, very good. So we've done extensive research with PhD professors from Texas A&M University, which was also the foundation for our white paper. We believe there are two fuels of the future. It's green ammonia and it's green methanol. And potentially for a significant amount of years also blue ammonia, subject to how carbon is being captured. But those two for us, for sure, are the fuels of the future.
Okay, so green ammonia and green methanol. Birgit, what do you say? Do you agree?
Well, I do believe the future is quite hybrid. And I do see the fuel cells as a key essential part of the solutions, as you can utilize fuel cells with a number of the new fuel alternatives. I also believe that there will be different fuels that will be optimal for different parts of the industry. And I would like to raise the point to some areas that I see as very ripe for early transition. And that would be typically channels and internal markets, coastal operations, where I do believe that we can work together, for instance, in the European market, to drive the initiatives, investments on both infrastructure development, piloting and scaling the technical solutions, as well as enabling clean energy production. So I think it will probably also be a market by market as we wait for the international regulations and the deep sea opportunities.
So thank you very much. Magnus and Ulrika, I think you had more questions for the panel.
Yes, we have one coming in here, and the question is, what is your opinion on nuclear power as fuel?
Okay, who would like to start on that one? George, yes.
Yeah, well, this is a technology that is already there. However, the regulatory frame is not there, so it's not something that we can use tomorrow. But it's something to consider in the far future. However, I believe that right now a hybrid technology, as Bridget said, is more in the view than nuclear for the time being. So a vessel that is burning dual fuel and at the same time has hybrid technology, and when it's close to shore or close to a limited emissions area, can turn to electric propulsion, then go to shore, have a cold ironing, shut down everything, and then go back again the same way, I think is the most, let's say, realistic view for the time being.
So possible.
And the fact is that this is something that can be done. And of course can be supported by further technology like fuel cells. This is also another big issue.
So technologically possible, but regulatory, it's not very clear. Magnus and Ulrik, do you have a very short and brief and focused question?
Well, I could take one which you've been touching on. Are there any further decisions you would want or expect from the regulators to make it easier to make the right choice about propulsion when building a vessel after 2023?
Yeah, that's a good one. What do you want from the regulators? Let's start maybe with George.
Well, I think that, as Rasmus said, the big problem is now the cost of these alternative fuels. So if we have the proper, let's say, support in order to have this cost reduced in a way, this will help a lot in going forward much faster. Okay. So we need to have the incentives on a regulatory basis to allow us to do this transition to non-carbon fuels. Okay. I think this is the maximum that we have to wait for.
Incentives, you also mentioned that, Rasmus. Is there anything else you'd like to say from the regulators, the rest of you? Okay, incentives and clarity, we can sum up. Now, last question, and I'd like you to answer this with just a yes or no, actually. The Getting to Zero Coalition, I know you all know what that is, 150 companies supported by governments and NGOs. The aim of a zero-emission vessel by 2030. I've read that it's called the Maritime Shipping's Moonshot Ambition. So I'd like you to tell us, is it possible and will it happen? Birgit, yes or no? Yes, everybody's nodding here. Is it a yes, even from you, Mr. Lee?
Yes, I think the technically we can have a zero carbon emission vessel by 2030. Even I think tomorrow maybe, but I think this is just technically, yeah.
So technically it's already there, but regulatory we need to work. Thank you very much for joining us, all 4 of you, at this event. Thank you very much. So now it's time for our inspirational speaker from another sector. Now, Mr. Per-Olof Arnes, he's a senior logistics strategist at Enride, which is a technological company providing freight mobility solutions, specialized in electrical and autonomous. I think you've heard of the Enride pods. Now, Mr. Arnes, he has spent the last decade actually researching the digital development at Chalmers University in Sweden. But then he decided that just studying the future was not enough, so he wanted to help build the future, so he joined Enride. About digital, electrical and autonomous, the future of freight. Welcome, Per-Olof.
Thank you so much.
Looking really forward to hear your inspirations for us.
Thank you. Thank you. So, and thanks for having me. My name is Per-Olof Arnes, and I work at a company called Enride. And you might have heard about us. You might have seen this pod that we have. And after this, you will know a little bit more, at least, about what we do. We have existed. We exist to meet one of the biggest challenges that we have. We need to reset the entire transportation system. We need to have a change in the whole of society towards more sustainable, more efficient and more useful transportation. And it's our job to drive that change that we have before us. And the whole embodiment of what we do can be seen in this picture. This is from The Economist, roughly a year and a half ago, when we set the world speed record for electric autonomous transport vehicles at the Top Gear test track in the UK. This vehicle, we call it the pod. It's fully electric, it's autonomous, and it really has no place for a driver. And I will come back to what that vehicle does and what it represents. We were founded quite recently, 2016, 6 years this year. And already in 2019, we were the first on the planet to go on public roads with these types of vehicles. And we have today, to our knowledge at least, the biggest fleet of heavy-duty electric vehicles in Europe, with drivers. As you can see, the left vehicle here has a place for a driver. It looks like a normal truck, but it's fully electric. And we are scaling that very fast together with our customers. So we are trusted by some of the world's most demanding and large companies. And they have all very ambitious climate goals, net zero 2030, things like that. And actually, just a few days ago, we went public with our latest collaboration, and that's with Maersk, where we will assist them in electrifying their North America operations using 300 connected electric trucks, building 150 charging stations, and by using these, create more than 1 million fossil-free electric shipments during the next 5 years. So we are really proud about that collaboration. Now, looking at what's going on, and the world is in trouble because we need to drastically reduce the carbon footprint. And talking to shippers, they all know that they account for roughly 7 to 8% of the global CO2 emissions. These shippers, as I said, they have very ambitious climate agendas. And when they look at their supplier base, they see that very few carriers can provide cost-competitive electric transport. The market is really not there yet. And the clock is ticking. It's already 2022. Now, switching sides to the other side of the table, from the carrier perspective, they see that all of their customers have these ambitious climate agendas, but they don't see the willingness to pay for the transformation of the industry, because there are large parts of the industry that actually needs large transformation as well. And things are not looking that good in the transport industry. These are numbers from Sweden. I don't go into the details here, but the curves all show the research and development spending in different industries. And from 2015 to 2019, all industries combined increased their spending by roughly 25%. Some sectors went above that. The service sector more than doubled. Automotive, 50% up. Transport and logistics went down 80%. So in 4 years, this group of companies stopped spending on their own future. And the reason behind that, there might be many reasons behind that, but one of them is what we call the law of diminishing returns. Or on the x-axis, we have the buck, and on the y-axis, we have bang for the buck. And we've all seen this. I mean, if you bought an electric passenger car 10 years ago, you were probably seen as an early adopter. The charging network was not really there yet. And yeah, you paid a little bit too much for the usefulness you got. But look at it today when we have electric cars overtaking. So in Sweden, we have more than 50% of all new cars sold are either electric or hybrids. Norway, our neighbor country, have more than 90% electric cars of all new cars sold. But sooner or later, you will end up in stagnation. You will have saturated the system. And this is what I think is happening now in the transport industry. And there are some very, very understandable reasons for that. This is nothing negative. This is how things go. This is a cyclic development. So we have an industry with low profit margins, 2 to 3% for a haulage company. We have large balance sheets. You need to have expensive equipment, expensive vehicles in order to be able to transport stuff. You also have a high degree of fragmentation. Average number of trucks per company is usually between 2 and 5. The most common haulage company is actually an owner driving his or her own truck. That's the company. And that's, of course, detrimental when we talk about the digital maturity. It's not easy to keep track of what goes on in the tech field when you're out driving your own truck all day. So all of these combined make a system and an industry that will focus on fixing what they have instead of trying out new stuff. Because of the high balance sheets and the low profit margins, they need a high capital turnover rate in order to be profitable. And this industry has been doing okay so far. The modern transportation industry is roughly 100 years old. And it started with the diesel engine, and then it has evolved since then. But looking at one of the core components of what goes on in the transport industry, we have what we call reductionism. And my clicker is not working. So while we fix that, I can briefly explain that reductionism, here it comes, thank you, is a way for us humans to handle complexity. When we are faced with a system or a problem that is too complex for us to manage, we start to simplify. We create an abstraction. We try to lower the resolution in this example. Then we look for patterns in that system. And once we found those patterns, we take away the reality and we focus on the model. And an example of that could be the system that we have of zip codes, for instance. That's a great way to handle large and complex systems. With a zip code, we have a small piece of geography, small enough for the postman to actually learn the names of everyone living inside this zip code, and we give that small piece a number. Now, if we're smart, we will give that number a meaning, so that if you know the system of numbering, you can identify where to send something without actually knowing the address or knowing the person you are sending it to, because the system has its own built-in sorting algorithm. And this system enables us to send whatever to wherever without actually knowing anything and without a computer. We can do it with fully analog tools. And this is how it's been done for decades before we had computers in the industry. Looking at another way of simplification is the container. The container represents the last disruption in the freight industry. 66 years ago, the container was introduced, and it transformed the global supply chains forever. Because you have a standardized box, and it's so standardized that you can put anything you want inside, And then you have equipment that can handle that standardized box all over the world, so you can send whatever you want to wherever you want. But if you look at one of the EEE vessels today, one of those, very few of those 20,000 containers are actually full. Some of them might be full by weight, some of them by volume, some of them by floor space, but very few are full in all 3 dimensions. You will have inefficiencies in a system like that, but the trade-off is that you can scale fast, and you can scale a lot. So we have these economy of scale-based systems, but the last disruption was 66 years ago. That was when the container arrived. When the computers arrived, we started creating a bit more order in the system. We can manage more data, but we are not using the computers to their full potential. But now we have to, because when we introduce electric vehicles, it's no longer enough to just simplify away what goes on. If you want to plan for an internal combustion engine fleet to the left, the ICE fleet, we have mature models for that. You need to know when, you need to know how much, and you need to know where you have to send something. And then you can optimize based on your utilization rate of your fleet, for instance. Now, if you have a battery electric vehicle fleet, you need to have those variables, of course, but you also introduce new variables, and these will not be simplified away because these are too important to your end results. The weather conditions, the charging conditions. If your competitor actually stands next to you and charge at the same charger, you will both have an extended charging session because you will have to share the available energy. Now, for a passenger car, that might be okay, but for a commercial vehicle, it's unacceptable. It cannot happen because you have a schedule to keep. So you cannot wait 1 hour extra because your competitor decides to charge next to you. And your competitor feels the same way, by the way. The size of the battery in the vehicle determines the optimal use case for that vehicle. So you're not as flexible as you might be with diesel-powered trucks. And the driving speed affects a lot of your energy use, and so on and so forth. There are many variables. And these variables are also interdependent. So the white ones here, they are virtually independent from each other. If you change one, the others will stay the same. But if you change, for instance, your speed, you will affect the other ones, or at least some of them. And you will introduce feedback loops and a lot of complexity when going electric. And also, going up to the system level, one vehicle, okay, fine, but when you have 10 plus vehicles or even more, with the internal combustion engine fleet, you will just keep track of your paid ton kilometers, and you will be fine if you have your costs in order. Now, for the battery electric vehicle fleet, it's not about maximization, it's about optimization. You need to optimize every single battery pack for every single day of the economic lifespan, 8 years maybe, of a single vehicle. Once you do that, the reward is lower life cycle costs than the equivalent diesel fleet. But it takes a lot more algorithms to make it work. So in order to go electric, we need to release the old physical first mindset. I usually say that you could run most transportation systems we have today with a Pentium 4 computer and a fax machine from 1999. Like it's 1999, we are still solving those problems. We are just doing it a little bit faster, but we are attacking the same problems like we did 23 years ago. With the digital first mindset, we will start with a clean slate. We need to attack problems in a new way. We need data that will support all the decisions made. That means that the zip code system will need to be replaced with a system that keeps track of every single shipment in the system and is ready to make adaptations in real time if needed. Looking at Moore's law, you know Moore's law showing the power of computers. Since 1999, computers have increased at least approaching 10,000 times more power. And we are not using that. We are still using computers to solve problems that are more than 20 years old. This is one of the developments. We have several of these S-curves ahead of us, and this is why we exist as a company. We want to drive the change in all 3 of these: automation, electrification, and digitalization. To do this, we need to rethink transport. We need to rethink how the system is put together, how it functions. We need to challenge some of the old truths in the system. And to support us in that, we need to be first to offer a number of different things. Heavy-duty electric vehicles fleet, we've been doing that for a year and a half. This Friday, it will be 18 months since we started operations, commercial operations, not pilots, trucks in real traffic, 24/7 operations. You need to go fully digital and integrate. You need to do it in order to be able to scale while still handling a large complexity. And you need to be ready to scale and go autonomous when needed and when available. And I will come to that. To be able to do that, we have our own operating system called Saga. Saga is from Norse mythology, the goddess of knowledge, and this is the brain in everything that we do. With Saga, we have a digital ecosystem, you might say, with a number of apps connected to it. So one of them is, for instance, the Evolve app. This is where we assess the electrification potential of a potential shipper, for instance. And then we can see, okay, we can electrify today here. We need to do some adjustments there. We will need to invest in some new gates or chargers there. And so we can decide wave 1, 2, and 3 to go fully electric. Once we've done that and started our operations, we have the Orchestrate app that will help us make all of these spur-of-the-moment decisions that are needed in order to plan for an electric fleet instead of a diesel fleet. And of course, we have an app called Explore to get the insights from the system, because we constantly need to feed back knowledge into all the other apps. And we are constantly learning, because electric is really hard to do. And everyone who is now buying their first electric truck will quickly realize that. We've been doing it for a year and a half now. Coming to the pod. The pod is our way of automating that can be automated in this system. We will still need humans in the system. We will still need drivers in the system. And we will still need manual trucks for some time. But we will be able to automate some of the things. And the question we always get is, what will all the truck drivers do? And I have a short video to show you one of those things. So imagine a truck without a cabin for a driver. That's the vehicle that we have. Now, if that were to be fully autonomous, we would need to handle all of these corner cases. What happens if a car has stopped by the side of the road, or a person walks out onto the road, or some other sort of freak occurrence that will happen once in a million? Well, let's say that we still have a driver, but the driver steps in when needed and operates the vehicle remotely. We actually did this at South by Southwest now in Austin a few weeks ago, operating our pods here in Sweden in real time, live. So this technology is already here. Now, this remote operator will take care of solving the problem at hand, and once the coast is clear, the operator presses autopilot and the truck goes on. And then the operator can take care of the next truck who has a problem, and the next, and the next, and so on. So by decoupling the human being from the cabin of the vehicle, we will actually create an entirely new type of job. This is an occupation that has not yet existed before. We have just hired the world's first remote truck driver in the US, and we are hiring more of these as we speak. Looking at the autonomy, we have a stage of 5 different levels regarding autonomy based on complexity. So the first one, the level 1, is when we go inside fenced areas. We did that in 2018. In 2019, we went on public roads closed by fenced-off areas at lower speeds. That we were first on the planet in 2019 to do. We are now dipping our toes into the rural and the highway cases, because the potential there is massive, as you might understand. The more general, the urban case, we are not there yet, but just the 4 first cases alone will cover a large portion of the world's freight volumes that go by land today. So this is our development path forward. And just to remind you, we have electric trucks also operating commercially today. Some of them will be replaced by automated transports in the near future. We are also running the automated track together. And I have a last video to show you about our latest prototype that we just launched in the US. So with the flatbed pod, we can take on containers. And we can tap into the global shipping supply chain system. And as all of you might know, since you're in the maritime industry, you know the vast potential of being able to jack into a system like this and start automating container transports in the hinterland. And this is not science fiction. It's being done today. This is not something that we are looking at 2030, 2035. We want to do it as fast as possible. So that's all from me, and thank you. And please look us up if you are interested in more. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Per-Ola. Lots of interesting things happening for real, not just science fiction, as you said.
Yeah.
Now, you were talking about the deal from last week with Maersk.
Yes.
Very interesting. We all follow that. Electrify their North American fleet with 300 Enride trucks. Now, that's still land-based.
Yes.
When does this come to sea?
This is the interface. So the port is the interface, the API to the hinterland. That's the port. So that's where the magic happens. All terminals have these properties. So when containers arrive, they need to go somewhere else. And someone needs to do that. And today, there are millions of trucks all over the world, or at least hundreds of thousands of them, transporting containers. And that's a very large part of the flows need to be electrified.
So this takes care of the interface. When
Yes.
will there be, what do you say, when will there be autonomous electrified vessels on sea?
On sea, I cannot say actually, because we work with road transport, but I mean short sea shipping can be electrified, because the batteries need to be recharged when you dock and so on. To go transocean, you need other types of solutions, I think.
But for short voyages, it's already here.
Yes,
And the
yes.
last panel actually said that the moonshot ambition for 2030, it's possible to reach. The technology is already there.
Yeah.
A bit of regulation still to go. Now, Maersk Growth, is it that has invested in Enride? You have a
Yes, that's
partnership
correct. Yes.
with Maersk Growth. It's their venture arm, so to say. Is this the way to go forward? We talked earlier here in the panel about partnerships, collaboration. Is this a good way to move forward, to get things done in the sector, would you say?
Yes, yes, partnerships with those who want to run, not those who want to sort of wait behind and see what the others are doing.
So you have to choose the right partners.
Yes, we have to choose the progressive ones that really want to run, because in transport, it was, for most solutions, technology is not the problem. It's human beings that are a problem, to get permits, to do all of these things. That's sort of, we need to make sure, because we are introducing autonomous technology into the general traffic. And of course, authorities and others have they need to check that everything goes according to what they think should be done.
So, but the technology is not the problem, and partnerships like these could become a way of running into the future. Do you see any?
Yes.
Do you have any other partnerships in pipeline?
Yes.
Yes. Not going to tell us here.
No, sorry, I cannot.
For this very small audience of 1,000 people.
No, but we are talking with several Fortune 500 companies, of course, and some of them are public already. General Electric Appliances, Bridgestone, SKF, Electrolux, and so on. So, yeah.
It's great to hear what's going on in the land-based transportation sector. What advice would you give to the shipping industry moving forward in this decarbonization travel that they're on?
I mean, given the long investment cycles, decades when you buy a new ship, you need to make sure that you are poised to meet the future demands. So energy is one of those things, but also connectivity, to make sure that you have the digital infrastructure needed. Because as a shipper, I would like to speak to my container on your ship directly to make sure that the temperature is okay. For instance, that's one thing. That container should be able to talk to whoever is picking it up in a port to say, I want to picked up by 3 o'clock because I have a train to catch. Those types of solutions are possible with digital technology instead of these sort of standardized rules of thumb that we have today.
So connectivity, not least,
Yes.
is very important to get.
Keep track of digital.
Thank you very much, Per-Olof Arnes, for joining us today.
Thank you.
So it's time now for our second panel. And this panel is on investing in human sustainability. To invest in human sustainability and healthcare for employees have become a top priority for ship management. In the eye of COVID-19 disruptions, seafarers are still struggling with wellness. And there are, of course, different ways on how to embrace healthcare and safety and human sustainability, both short-term, here and now, and also long-term, more for the future. Some examples could be, we've mentioned them already, digital tools and data management for decision-making, as well as autonomous vessels. We've been talking about that. That's a bit further on in time, though. What will become the game changers that will speed up this development for crew safety and human sustainability? And how is the industry preparing for this shift? That's the topic for our second panel. And before I introduce our distinguished guests, let me make the same reminder for questions. Now, you were good at posing questions in the first panel, so please continue to do so. You have the question box in your upper right corner, and the editorial team is waiting for your questions. They're ready to take on your comments and questions. So it's time for me to introduce the panel. And right next to me here in the studio, welcome back, Dr. Cleopatra Doumbia-Henry, President of the WMU. Welcome back, Cleo.
Thank you.
Welcome also Mr. Karsten Ostenfeld, your COO, Chief Operating Officer of Asia, Anglo-Eastern Ship Management. Welcome to you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. And welcome also Professor Chen Yuli, who is Professor of Merchant Marine at the College of Shanghai Maritime University. Welcome.
Good afternoon from Shanghai, everyone.
Good afternoon, it's for you. Yeah, that's right. And welcome also Mr. Masahiro Takahashi from NYK Line, where you're a general manager at the Technical Headquarters Management Group. Most welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon to all, depending on where you are.
Exactly. It's more good afternoon for you, but more good morning still for us here in Sweden. Welcome to all four of you. Now, turning first to you, Karsten, on the topic of investing in your crew to prepare them for the future. You had several ideas when we spoke on email, and you mentioned that the future will look more like space shuttles than rowing boats. Could you elaborate a little bit on this, please?
Yes, of course. I think it was, of course, a little bit of a provocative statement, but what I thought is, and the direction we are taking is that the future gonna contain much more of censorship. Is gonna contain much more of data exchange, and that's gonna be the future for our crew, and that's what they're gonna handle. And less is going to be a mechanical world as we know it from the past. So that's how we are changing the time for the moment.
So more digital tools. Do you think that the people in the sector is ready for this shift?
I think we're gonna most probably see slightly different types for the future. We're gonna recruit for shipping, where the mindset gonna be more the way you operate in a highly process specialized industry versus the more mechanical world which we have had in the past, where something could last a little bit longer. I think we give it a little bit of a notch, and then I think it'll continue operating. I think this world gonna disappear with the future technology, which is much more sensorized and much more relying on feedback signals and computerized decision making, etc. So I think the mindset gonna be different, and hence we're gonna recruit kind of different profiles and train them differently for the future.
Interesting. We'll keep that in mind for the rest of the discussion. Now, Professor Chen, you're educating the future officers. How do you prepare the future officers for the shipping industry? Professor Chen, I'd like to ask you how you prepare
Yes,
your,
can you hear
your
me?
students. Yes,
Can you
I
hear
can
me?
hear you. Yes.
Okay. So I think education and training to the seafarers is very, very essential investment to ensure the safety and the sustainability of the shipping industry. So, but we should like to know what the good maritime education and training institute service can provide to the seafarers with the competent knowledge and the skills to help them to deal with the future's challenge. Here, I just give you an example. Firstly, for example, in terms of maritime instructors, the instructor in MET Institute, the instructor is quite special, unique, because maritime instructors should not only have the profound theoretical knowledge, but also should have some adequate onboard experience. That is why in some high reputation MET institutions, the ratio between the students and the instructors should be less than that of non-MET subject, because the MET instructors should go on board to obtain some seagoing experience. So that's all. Thank you. Just one example.
Okay, so onboard experience is one of your examples. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Takahashi, you are a quite unique shipping company, actually. You have your own maritime academy. You've had it for 10 years. It's credited by the Philippine government. It's a 4-year education, and you have every year 120 students. Why did you start your own academy?
The why we started our own the Maritime Academy in the Philippines is that we want to secure the good young talented cadets, and we want to have the good loyalty officers. As we started the school, and that project was started in 2004-05, and before the before 2008 financial crisis, that the shipping was booming, and so that a lot of ship owners came to Filipino to get good officers. And that is since the middle of the 80s that the Japanese shipping companies are educating the growing the seafarers in the Philippines, but that due to the tough competition in the Filipino seafarers market, that we were thinking that we need something to do. And so that we wanted to recruit young people from even from the poor, if they are talented. And so we decided to prepare the 100 of we prepared for the loan for 100% of tuition and the boarding, so that without any money, that the good people can enroll to our academy. And after 4 years education, as we secure the cadet spot, which is rather difficult for the ordinary maritime cadets in ordinary the Filipino maritime academies, and so they are able to have the chance to challenge to the government examination, and so we follow up all of our cadets until they pass the examination. So we hired all of them. So we train them from the third officers, third engineer, to captain and chief engineer. So they are they could be the very good, loyalty people, and could be our real asset for our business. That is why we started.
So you actually source your own cadets from your own maritime academy. Very interesting to hear. Turning to you, Cleo, now what would you say will be the key competences for seafarers moving forward? We talked a lot about digital development. Is it that where...
Yes, I actually certainly think that the development of technical skills, and as we talk about technical skills, in today's day and age, we're talking about digital skills more and more. But again, sorry, thank you. More and more, I think we have to remember that most of the seafarers come from the developing world, and therefore ensuring that they have the right technological skills in the maritime and education institutions is going to be critical. Until we have that happening, for today, in today's day and age, seafarers are coming from the developing world. So how do we get that transfer to these technological skills that is going to be more and more required going into the future? So I see a challenge there, but of course, all of these things will be gradual. I think it will be happening gradually. The state-of-the-art technical skills, the sensitivity to the sustainability issues of today, and the importance of ensuring that we have the crew that are well trained to take on the issues and therefore to deal with the challenges. As the on board ships today, the crew numbers are getting smaller and smaller as technological skills take effect.
Karsten, we were also emailing before here. You talked about tapping into other nationalities also for the future.
Yeah, that's right. Because I guess there's also an element of cost and payments in this discussion, because and I think the price will probably gonna go up for the future profile of seafarers, for the reason of that them requiring a better education, for the reason of requiring a better understanding of the future landscape, and I think also as countries develops, as rightly pointed out, we will have to create alternatives in different places. So because what you always see from seafarers is, in the second when alternatives start being created in their home country, they actually stop seafaring. So the more opportunities which is coming available in certain countries, I think the less seafarers going to be available. It typically always follows, let's say, the development of GDP in a certain country. So I'm sure we're going to tap into other countries, and hence we're going to establish training facilities, as correctly pointed out. I think this has to be something which is done by the industry. That's the only way we can get the profile required for the future ships.
And Professor Chen, talking about competences, we talked earlier, you and I, about important competences that will be required from the crews on the vessels for the future. What do you think? What competences will be important?
So actually, the standards of competence of seafarers has already been well domesticated in the STW Convention as a mandate. But the latest STW Convention amended Manila Amendment was adopted in 2010, which has already nearly 12 years passed. So I think the new I just have to have one suggestion. I think I have two new competence that in the future the seafarers should be highly highlighted and the update. The first competence is the knowledge and the ability of the promoting super energy, because the contribution made towards the mission of the reducing rely maritime administrations and the ship management, but also rely on the seafarer. Seafarers as the frontline operator of a ship can play a direct and significant role in limiting or reducing emissions from like a number of super energy efficient operations such as slow steaming, rerouting, also make a good in the super energy efficiency if the seafarers adequately implement those operations. The second competence I think it should be highlighted for seafarers in future is the maritime cyber risk management knowledge, cybersecurity, because traditionally cyber risk management has been focused on operations in the physical domain, but a greater reliance on the digital integration, automation, and the network-based system has created an increasing need for cyber risk management in the shipping industry. At present, most attacked on board are navigation equipment and system and power system. One of these reasons is that seafarers inadequately load wireless infected data on USB ports on those systems on board.
So what you're saying, we have a little bit of a bad internet connection here, but I think if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is knowledge and ability of promoting ship energy efficient technologies, you were talking about that,
yes.
And also maritime cyber risk management knowledge.
Yes.
Turning to you, Cleo, would you agree those competences will be very important for the future?
Certainly, these are important competencies in terms of the technological evolution that is constantly happening with ships today, and therefore, in my view, we will see a growing trend in terms of the nature of maritime education and training. It certainly has to adapt to the evolving developments in shipping, and this is happening all of the time. The challenge will be for developing countries to have the capacity to keep up with these developments and get their seafarers trained in the appropriate skills that are now needed as we move into the future.
So how do you think the sector is keeping up?
The sector is certainly keeping up because there is so much development with technology. This is a worldwide issue, so you can't avoid that. The question is whether it's going fast enough and whether the developing countries from where the seafarers come, this is the big challenge, whether these developing countries will have the capacity to actually keep up pace with the developments as we see the technological skills at sea and the necessary, the amount of time that seafarers are spending. The impact of COVID-19 must not be underestimated. We all saw how much the seafarers were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and how many of them remained at sea for well beyond their periods of service. So there are big issues that have to be addressed, and we'll have to, not just cybersecurity issues, but we have to also look at how we're going to create this sort of probably global leadership and teamwork that I think for the future that must also be taken into account.
This global leadership that you're talking about, Cleo, what about you, Kirsten? Do you also see, as Cleo says, the most challenging areas in the developing countries of the world?
I think actually, I don't think we can limit it to the developing countries. I think it's basically everywhere. I think we're going to have an after wake of COVID, which is going to harm our supply of people, I think. So there will be people who decides after COVID that I have done my part sailing, because the way the world was treating the seafarers during the COVID, I think, was not very impressive, to be honest. And I think there are people in good age who will decide to do something else because of what they experienced during the COVID with extended contracts and limited support to the ships. So there's no question that the industry is going to have a challenge to be sure that we get the talent on board for the future. I would say so far, I think we will manage. I think we will have a known technology on board vessels, and we can most probably cope up with training. Yes, it's going to cost money, it's going to cost time, no doubt. but I think we'll cope up. I'm actually more worried about the future technologies because that's going to require even more training and even more talented people to handle the future fuels. What all the matters we talk about when we talk about decarbonization as being the agenda point for the industry, then I think we're going to require a new set of people. And the big question is, of course, how do we get them?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, actually, Karsten. Could you answer it yourself? How do you get these new people?
I think I heard in the former presentation there was the word collaboration mentioned, and I think that's gonna, in my view, gonna be key for the industry, that we're gonna set up different ways of recruiting people and make the industry attractive. I think we have talked about this for 20 years. How do we ensure that seafaring gonna be attractive? And I think we have to work even harder to get the talented people into the industry.
That's a challenge for you moving forward, and solved by not least collaboration and cooperation. Now, Mr. Takahashi, I know that you are on a journey together with the Japanese government. You are running a project on fully autonomous ships. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yes, we are very proud to participate to the DFAS consortium. DFAS is the abbreviation designing the future of full autonomous ship. The DFAS project comprised 30 Japanese companies, including NYK and 3 NYK group companies. The project is sponsored by Nippon Foundation and the Japanese government. The aim of the project was to develop a ship-side navigation system that controlled autonomous functions from the ships. And number 2, a shore-side system that monitors and supports the ships from shore, including remote ship handling functions. And number 3, information and communication system that enabled stable communication between the ships and the shore. And from 26 February to March 1, 2022, just last month, coastal container ship named Suzaku, which is 95 meters long, navigated 790 kilometers round-trip route, departing from and returning to Tokyo Bay, to Ise Bay, to Yokkaichi Port, using the DFAS system, including remote operation from the Fleet Operation Center. This successful trial in the highly congested area of Tokyo Bay. Tokyo Bay is one of the most congested passage routes in the world. When do you think,
Mr. Takahashi, that we will have autonomous vessels like all over the world, not just in Tokyo Bay?
Yeah, that this is just a trial project, and so that the experience from this coastal trip can be extended to the global operation, because that that the most difficult part is the coast side, and so that the in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, there's less risk.
Yes.
But that the fully unmanned operation of the ship is not possible. For the passage of the Pacific Ocean, because that still that ship is consisted of so many machineries that the machinery may have a failure, which has to be fixed by people. So that it's not fully autonomous for the I think that for the voyage ship for the time being, until that the ship is fully equipped with operated by electrical power.
Okay.
As long as we are using that that the fossil fuel, it is very difficult without the proper maintenance.
So it's still a bit of way to go there. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the editorial team. Magnus and Ulrik, do we have any questions for the panelists?
Yes, we do, and here is one question to the panel. What is needed from a ship operator to keep its seafarers in an increasingly competitive labor market?
Who would like to start on that one?
I can probably
Maybe
take
Cleo,
that.
Yes.
Certainly, with the conditions of course of the pandemic, I think there has been a huge impact on seafarers. A lot of work and research has been done in this regard, and I think it will become. In a survey recently done by WMU last year, we found that there was a growing trend for seafarers to finance their own training. This is something that is uniquely needed, something very recent. This has never happened before. And there, in fact, in my view, I see grave concern that seafarers are having now to finance their own training and before be able to, find ship in which they would then work. So this is one of the issues that I think that needs to be reversed. Optimally, in my view, companies should invest in their crew. And if we see a reversal of that, it would be quite disconcerting.
So you want companies to pay for the education for their crew?
Absolutely, they should. And it's in the interest of the ship, in the interest of the ship owner.
In the interest for everyone, of course. Yeah. Yes, Magnus and Ulrik, more questions.
Right. Here's one. With the Lego or modular approach to new ships, retrofit solutions will demand new crew training. How can suppliers support this need?
What do you say?
Should I jump into this one? So I think
Please.
actually we have learned a little bit over the last couple of years on crew training, and I think the future gonna be much more virtual as what we have learned now for the last 2 years. When we was onboarding new technology during this period, the only way we could do it eventually was to use technology like virtual conferences, and it has worked relatively well. I think another technology which I think we see much more these days is, of course, virtual reality, where we can create the space of what people are going to meet on board ships. So I think that would be one element where suppliers can support to be sure that they have training for their products, which can be distributed globally without physical presence.
So Cleo, do you agree as the president of a university?
Yes, I certainly agree, and I think what I would add to that is a very important need that will need to be enhanced with respect to cybersecurity awareness and the proficiency of that. I think this is a big issue with this changing world and the technologies that currently exist. So that is another of the concern that I think we should not underestimate with cybersecurity, and therefore the need for awareness and for proficiency.
Thank you. Magnus and Ulrik, do we have a final question from the audience?
Yes, we have another one, which goes, what will be the game changer when it comes to crew safety and the well-being of the crew?
That's an excellent question. It's actually also my last question in my script here, so let's take on that one. The game changers for when it comes to crew safety and well-being and human sustainability, maybe we could check with all of you. Maybe, Cleo, you could start.
WMU undertook a 2021 survey of seafarers. So that's very recent, as I indicated earlier. And it is really for companies to invest in their crew. It's not for the crew to invest in itself. Of course, you have to further develop yourself, but it is really the company that should be doing that. And so I think it is important that we have good corporate goals, and that the culture shows that the organizations that recruit seafarers, the ship owners, should value the crew. And if the more we value the crew, I think the more effective shipping will be, and the more sustainable the oceans will become.
So the companies need to invest in their crew. Mr. Takahashi, what do you say? What will be the game changers?
Yes. And I think that the pathway to zero emission will bring a lot of changes in the shipping, as the ammonia is considered a strong candidate of zero emissions, but it is toxic. And so that the safety management system of entire engine plant is essential. So so that it is not just changing the fuel, or that designing of a ship has to be changed completely, and more the sensor system and more control from a part and so on. And also that about the well-being of the seafarers, that they are during the COVID-19 pandemic, that we are all aware that they are so much apart from their family for long time. Then they have to take care of the family. So that how they connect to the family is important for the communication, and also the to support the family, that they taking care of the monetary thing is the most important. So we have started e-money platform named Marco Pay in the Philippines. That seafarers, not only in the Philippines, but seafarers are high-paying job, but sometimes they have a difficulty to open a bank account or obtaining their personal loans because of their unique employment system. They only get money, income on the not in the domestic. So that we set up the e-money system, then that the seafarers can have access to their money from the mobile phone, so that that makes that their life and the family life very easier. So that type of thing is important.
So changes in the design of the ship, and also helping seafarers with their payments. Professor Chen, what do you say? What will be the game changers in well-being for seafarers?
So the shipping industry there's no doubt that will become more autonomous, much smarter, and much greener in the future. But this doesn't mean that the shipping industry will also 100% become much safer and more efficient if humans in the shipping industry, particularly seafarers, are not adequately trained and educated. So that is in the future, the shipping industry should invest more education and training for seafarers. That's all.
More education for the training. Thank you very much. And Karsten, what is your advice, the game changer for the well-being of seafarers?
Well, I think if you talk about the two elements, so the safety first, what will change the safety compliance and the safety culture on board a ship? I think it's a move from compliance to desire. So the way we work with our people is to create the environment where people really desire to stay safe. And that entails a lot of stuff. I think that entails teamwork, that entails personal integrity and training and so on and so forth. So I think the game changer actually on the safety culture will be people itself. So that's one thing. The second, the well-being is kind of easy, because that's basically that we do what we have promised. I think if we create a proper environment around people, that they actually get relieved on time, that they get paid on time, that all this is orderly, that they know when they're going to join the ship again, so they have an orderly life and the work. I think that's a well-being part. Then we can attach a lot of other good initiatives. We can have facilities, training facilities, etc., and proper food and healthy food and so on and so forth. This is of course comes on top, but I think let's just do the basic first. And now we have to reinvent this after the pandemic. Because then we missed it out a lot.
So reinvent the basic, and also this could be the good last word for this panel, from compliance to desire. Yes, Cleo, you could end up.
Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to add one other thing to that very interesting discussion we've just had, and it's the engagement of women at sea. That I therefore could not let pass, because it's so important. And it must be a game changer. That, in my view, the industry has a long way to go. So will only be possible when specific actions are taken to increase women's participation on board ships. And I expect the industry to do something about that going forward. We are well already into the 21st century.
That's a very good ending word for this panel. More women as seafarers. And don't forget, from compliance to desire, it's all about the people. Thank you all four panelists for joining us today at this event. Thank you very much. And now it's time for us to close this event. Okay, To help me close this Innovation Summit, I'd like to present the President of the Marine Division and also the Executive Vice President of Alfa Laval Group, Mr. Samir Kalra. Welcome.
Thank you, Mia. Really happy to be here. And I must admit, it's been super inspiring. I've been listening into the summit for the last couple of hours. And to listen to thought leaders, both from the industry and from the academia, talk about how we can enable a more sustainable future. I think it's been fantastic, actually.
Yeah, it has actually been very nice to be here at stage also. So what are your reflections? What do you bring with you?
You know, there's been a lot said in the last couple of hours, and trying to wrap it up in a smart way is not going to be easy, but let me give it a shot. The first thing I would like to flag is, if I was to, this is our second Innovation Summit. And if I look at the narrative between what was discussed 1 year ago and where we are today, I think there has been a lot of development in the last 1 year. Last year, we were talking about, when we spoke about the need for policy, regulation, it was not really clear. Yeah, there was a need, but at this point in time, what we heard today was, yes, there is now a carbon mechanism in place, and it's going to come out to IMO. And the question is not what the regulation is, but when will it pass through? So it's an if on the table today. So we have made a lot of direction there. There is today, we heard from the panelists about there is going to be a study where the fuel's lifetime emissions are going to be calculated by IMO. And in this way, I think these are great things, because then we have a common truth to work with, and not opinions about which fuel being more carbon friendly or less carbon friendly in a to life cycle emissions perspective.
So you have a common map.
A common map. I think that's been really, really good progress over the last 1 year. The second thing that really struck me in terms of the narrative was, last year, there was a lot of talk about LNG as a bridge fuel and LNG as a fuel going forward. Today, we heard a lot about green methanol, green ammonia. So I think the industry has moved from a more carbon-friendly fuel to how do we get a complete carbon-neutral fuel to come into place. That's the second thing
It's a big difference.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a big change there as well. And last but not the least, there was no discussion around people the last time. Today, people occupied a big piece of the discussion, and I think this is a very essential piece to get to a more sustainable future. So my view is, we have made the pace of change has accelerated in the last 1 year. And I think there is a broader swathe involved from the industry, from the entire value chain, who are looking at it and seeing, I have a responsibility. How do I make it happen as well? So this was one reflection I had from when I compared last year to this year. The second reflection is, I was watching Ayn Rand, and I must admit, it was looking at the future today. And when we look at the shipping industry, we always think of ourselves, we are unique in shipping. Yeah, this is the only industry. And then I looked at his slide, and when he was talking through it, and Per mentioned low profit margins. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Big balance sheets. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Fragmented industry. Exactly where we are. Digital maturity? Question mark. And then you look at all these, and then when you look at that, you say, really? I think maybe we are not as unique as we think we are. There are other industries who face a similar challenge. And if I look at the operational challenge of how they are navigating having an internal combustion engine, which is the way they work with today, and they are trying to go to electrical vehicles, they have increasing complexity. And I look at the fact it's rather similar in shipping as well. We have the fossil fuel trying to compete with the fuel that is a little bit more expensive, not economically viable today. And at the same time, more complexity for us also going forward. I just thought to myself, if the road freight industry can be dynamic enough, they are coming up with solutions that make them around new technology, increase collaboration, then if they can do it, so can we in shipping. That was another reflection.
So that's a good learning.
Yeah, exactly. I think we can learn from others as well.
Yes.
And last but not the least is, when we put these two topics together, we thought they were rather disparate topics, People side is one side, and then the building a vessel for the 2030 is another side. And then when I heard the different panelists talk, one of the things that really struck me was, if you look at a ship being designed for 2030, it will require more technology. It requires more amount of digital content on board. It's going to require new product platforms to be put to be carbon neutral. which means effectively it translates into new skills and more skills. Then you look at the people side of the story, and when you heard this last panel discussion come through just now, what I heard was, A, there are going to be alternatives on land. And a lot of new young people may not like to come out to sea. And I can understand that if you want to have Instagram, you may come out on a ship and you're not going to be able to post anything for the next 3 months. I think it's hard to attract people in that kind of an industry at this point in time. 2, I heard that a lot of people have been a bit disappointed in the way they have been treated in COVID.
Yeah.
A lot of people may never come back to the industry. So what I could hear was skills are actually, a number of technical skills will be lost permanently, and it may be a little bit more difficult to attract new skills to come out that we need in this industry. So it's one thing to build a ship for 2030, and it's another thing to operate that ship in 2030 in a safe, efficient, and reliable manner.
Yeah.
So I think if we don't solve the people piece, there is no way we are going to solve the 2030 piece in terms of building a vessel for the future, because in the end, someone has to operate it, And people sometimes forget, you need 5 years of training to get a chief engineer on board a vessel or a master on board a vessel. This is not someone you can pick up from the street and put them on board a vessel, And this means we need to start planning for it already today. So,
So how do you actually solve the skill sourcing challenge?
I think here there is a role in terms of the educational institutions. I think Cleopatra, she mentioned here, I think the curriculum and syllabi in these institutions needs to be upgraded to what are the needs of the future. I think someone mentioned earlier that we have this chicken and egg situation here where you need to train people on the new product platforms, but these new product platforms are not yet out in the market. So which goes first? We have, for example, in Alfa Laval, a test and training center. We would be happy to actually volunteer here. We have in our test and training center methanol. We have biofuels. By the end of this year, we will have ammonia. And we have an engine. And we have replicated an entire set of equipment that replicates a machinery space. We would be happy to volunteer to say, okay, guys, we would be a place where you could train your seafarers to see what they would expect to see when they actually go on board a vessel in the future. And I'm sure we are not the only ones. There will be more who have something similar. I think that could be another way to solve this chicken and egg situation, actually.
Yeah, that's a good thing. You raise your hand for a bit of collaboration there on the educational side. Now, Alfa Laval is, of course, deeply involved in both these issues and all of these issues. So what would you say is the Alfa Laval point on well, you're engaged in a lot of collaborations, of course.
When we look at trying to solve the sustainability piece, seen from an Alfa Laval perspective, we have been working in 2 dimensions. Number one is we have an existing product portfolio that needs to work with, in this journey towards being more sustainable. And here, what we have looked at is, A, we need to be a little bit more fuel flexible so that we are future-proof for the vessels, not for 10 years, because typically a ship's lifetime is about 20 years, actually. Here, all our existing product platforms are now multi-fuel enabled. We have multi-fuel boilers, we have multi-fuel high-speed separators, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The second thing is we understand that the ship's crew in the future would need a little bit more help than they do today. So almost everything that goes out from Alfa Laval today is actually data enabled. So you can get the data back and we can be supportive to the crew seated on land. So this is a little bit what we do with the existing equipment. But we also know the journey from going from where we are today to zero is a slope, There's an incline to get there, which means we need to facilitate the transition. And we have been working in 3 critical dimensions. We have been working around energy efficiency, where we have, as examples, our air lubrication systems, our energy power packs, collecting low-grade waste heat recovery. We have been working around clean energy. So we have our wind propulsion. You've heard about this. There's been a lot of press about this one. We have been working with fuel cells. And last but not the least, this is slightly underappreciated. How do you improve operational practice on board? The skill set of someone who's become a new captain is not the same as someone who is a 10-year captain.
Of course.
Right. Now, if you're trying to weather out a vessel across a long passage, how do you make sure that you can encapsulate all the skills that are available and people who have done it a number of times and help a young master to do it in a safe, efficient, and in a good manner? And I think when we have acquired StormGeo, this company last year. It's a digital solutions business. It makes sure you can transit across the water in a safe, efficient manner by a set of people who are actually transiting the route 5 times a day rather than 5 times a year, you know. Trying to get best operational practice is you can do more with what you already have rather than trying to do a lot of new things as well. So I think Alfa Laval is doing a lot of things, and I think the key piece here is we are becoming much better collaboration partners because we are doing a lot of this in partnerships and through M&A as well, not trying to do everything ourselves organically. There's a lot to do.
Also together with your customers, and they put pressure on you, I know that, which is a good thing. So on a broader note, what does all this mean for the industry moving forward into 2022 and forward?
You know, I think, Mia, during the summit today, 2 words came out repeatedly, again and again. One was speed.
I was also thinking about speed, lots.
And the second thing that came out was collaboration. Repeatedly, these 2 words came together. And I think when it comes to speed, the one thing that I can think of is when it comes to regulation, we all no matter where you are in the shipping space, we need to be supportive of any regulation that has built around, you know, carbon pricing mechanism around it, and that will enable the delta between the current fuels and the future fuels to be narrowed. Any regulation around this, we need to be supportive of this one, and this has to be a collaborative endeavor. It is not someone who can do it standalone. I think financing has to be supportive of any projects that are absolutely green and help this transition to move. I think when we look at collaboration, it's not simply around, you know, technology platforms that need to be speeded up. There is also the situation, I think it was Rasmus from Trafigura who highlighted this. There is this supply and demand chicken and egg situation around if I have a green fuel, where is the demand offtake? And the people who need the demand say we don't have a fuel. We need to collaborate across the complete value chain to be able to solve this piece. We will not be able to do it alone. And last but not the least, I think we should not forget the people piece. If we forget this one, the rest is not going to work anyway.
It's not going to work. So collaboration across broader partnerships.
Yes, exactly.
And of course speed and not to forget the people in the sector. Thank you very much, Samir, for closing this for us in such an interesting way.
Thank you very much, Mia. Yeah, really a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you all at the next Marine Innovation Summit in 2023.
Yes, we do that. Thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you also to all the presenters, to the panelists, and to you, the audience, for posing questions. And just like Samir said here, we would like to welcome you next year to the Alfa Laval Marine Summit of 2023, where I'm sure we will have a lot to talk about. Thank you very much for joining us here today.